Welcome to Daggerheart Characters. Today we will be doing a full build on the Necromancer class. There should have been a video that already came out where I did just like a quick how you could make it within game, a build where your GM should say yes to it. A lot easier to get by basically because it just uses features that already exist in the game, takes a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to create a Necromancer that I thought would be fun to play. But here, we're going to do a full build with the Midnight and the Codex domains, and I'm not going to go through it. Just, I'll let you, if you want, to go do that on your own time. Demiplane.com, just search, like in Google, Demiplane, Daggerheart domain cards. It's very easy to look, if you don't have your own cards, to look virtually, how two different domains might work with each other, just looking at the card selections that you would have at each level. Very, very easy list view, card view on there. Once again, you can just only show the cards from certain domains as you please as well. So I encourage you, if this class entices you at all, or just in general, the Midnight and the Codex domains are really cool together. Lots of synergy, especially when you're thinking Necromancer. So, starting evasion 10, starting hit points 6. There's no that's not unbalanced in any way. This is, I believe, the Sorcerer's starting point. Class, items, a book you're trying to translate, or Whispering Orb. Didn't change this from my other Necromancer build. It just makes nice sense, each of them adding just a little bit of flavor as to what type of Necromancer you are. For the Necromancer's Hope feature, Vampiric Touch. I know, an original name. Hey, sometimes it just happens. Spend 3 hope to mark a hit point on a target within close range. The GM may spend 2 fear to mark a stress slot instead. Additionally, you clear a stress slot yourself. So, you're just taking a hit point away from a dude within close range of you, of course. Love it. That's going to bring us on to the Blood Magic class feature. When you deal minor or major magic damage to a creature, you can mark a hit point of your own to increase the damage threshold by 1. No damage becomes minor damage becomes major damage, and major damage becomes severe damage. That will bring us on to our subclass choices. You can choose either the Death Dealer or the Dead Raiser. I know, once again, just ultimately, you would never be able to come up with these names on your own. You're welcome for being so creative with that. Your spellcasting trait is going to be Knowledge for this subclass. You could change to something else. I think Knowledge makes the most sense. Dead, at least in terms of like your codex. I chose codex, so that's why I went with Knowledge instead of, if I would have chosen like Arcana and Midnight, then I would have gone that. But really love the cohesion between codex and Midnight, and it really isn't close. Now, Dead Raiser. Play the Dead Raiser if you want to have an undead companion and intervene in fate. This, don't just skip ahead if you watched my other Necromancer build where I did do an undead companion. This is not the same. That's not going to, it's a weaker companion than the Ranger class's companion. It's the same companion, but you're just going to be able to invest in it less because it doesn't even on board at the earliest until 5th level, right? When you can choose the specialization features is where you can raise yourself, get yourself a little pet undead zombie or skeleton. But also intervene in fate. We are kind of like a sorcerer can be, or a wizard can be, like a thorn in the side of a GM in D&D. Here, you can be a bit of a thorn in the side of your GM with a few of these features. Already went through a couple of those where you're like stealing GM or forcing your GM to spend a lot of fear to keep a creature alive, etc. So first thing up here is going to be Bone Armor. This is very heavily influenced by another D&D go-to for the Warlock subclass, which is the Armor of Agathis. I don't think I pronounced that correctly. That's how I pronounce it, but I think it's got a different pronunciation. Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. This is very much influenced by that. Instead of ice, it's bone. And so you gain +1 bonus to your armor score. I want to say, as we go through these, as with all these videos, if you have any advice, if you think something's unbalanced, if you play this class, let me know what was unbalanced, and if you have any advice on how to balance things better, whatever the case, I'm always open to updating these. You should be able to find a write-up for this that you would be able to print off and use then if you wish to in the description. Also, encourage you to go ahead and play test these things and then come back and give any kind of feedback that you have with that. So that's why sometimes I might give you a little bit of an explanation of what I'm going for. So at the beginning of each session, you earn a number of bone dice equal to your spellcasting trait. When you mark an armor slot, you can expend a bone die. When you expend a bone die, you deal 2d6 plus 2 physical damage to all adversaries within close range. This will scale. At 5th level, you do 4d6 plus 5 physical damage. At 8th level, you deal 4d6 plus 10 physical damage. This damage is very specifically set to, more often than not, deal 1 hit point or cause a creature or target to take 1 hit point. If this does hit them. That's part of the reason why it's only designed to do that. It's also designed that it cannot deal severe. It will not pass the severe threshold, specifically for creatures within those tiers of play that you're supposed to be using as a GM. So that's kind of what these are. It's just like, it's a little tick. It's just ticking away at them, and it's limited in usage, and you already have to mark one of your armor slots as well to use it, as well as getting rid of one of those bone die. So I think that this is nicely, I spent quite a bit of effort into making sure that this would be a nicely balanced feature and kind of fit the flavor as well and everything. So I weakened it actually quite a bit compared to what you might think based on some other abilities out there, but also it hits automatically. So that's the big thing, to all creatures within a close range. Feeding on Fear. Once per session, when an ally within far range rolls a success with fear, you may instruct the GM to treat that roll as if it were a success with hope. However, your ally does not get the hope, you do. That's as simple as it gets once per session. I think that makes it nice and easy to track, and you really don't have to track it. You just know going in that you have this ability to do this once. Now, going on to the specialization features, if you so choose to go into these, which you probably will if you're choosing this subclass. Raise the Dead. You get an undead, zombie, or skeleton companion of your choice, and you are just going to use the Ranger companion build sheet, reflavored, obviously, as a skeleton or a zombie, or you could reflavor it as an undead dog or something. Whatever you want to do, you're raising some sort of dead entity that is now your little companion. And you get along with each other, probably. And then you've got Absorbed Souls. You gain a bonus of +1 to your hit points. Idea here, of course, just being that... Oh, by the way, so this Raised Dad feature, the reason that I have it onboarding here is I do want this... It's like an undead companion. I don't think it should be as strong as some sort of living beast. So it has 0 chance of ever becoming as strong as one of those. And then the flavor for Absorbed Souls, I think, is pretty clear. Like, as you've just... take on the energy of those who die around you, eventually it's enough that you are just kind of buffed and you are now tougher to take down. And then you've got the big mastery feature here, Grim Reaper. I love this. It's not like it's the best feat ever, but I think it's really, really fun and flavorful and fits this kind of Grim Reaper idea of kind of having a little bit of impact on the fate of your allies and being able to prevent or improve their odds of staying alive, actually, because of your connection with the dead, your connection with the Grim Reaper. You kind of, you sweeten the deal for your player. So once per session, when an ally within far range makes a death move, if the player agrees to it, of course you can't just force this on them. I don't know why they would say no exactly, but they could. So you can spend 1 hope to alter their choice of death move. First of all, for the Glaze of Glory death moves, so these are the names of the death moves, and then we're just going to tweak them a little bit. Instead of take 1 action, it reads take 2 actions which both critically succeed. So typically it's take 1 action, which critically succeeds. This one, take 2, and they both critically succeed. Avoid death. The player accepts a scar automatically instead of rolling a hope die to potentially avoid that scar like you normally can do when you choose the avoid death feature. However, in this instance, they do not, and I should say also in this instance, they do not fall unconscious like you normally would do with your avoid death feature. Instead, they clear half of their hit points and half of their marked stress. Now, if you're familiar with the game, you might say that's starting to sound a little bit like a success on Risk It All. And I came to that very same conclusion, and however, I do think that I make this different enough that it's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to take avoid death in every circumstance. I do think, essentially, if it's early on in a fight, it looks like, if you go down, your party's probably going to TPK, and half of your hit points just isn't going to be enough. you still might want to risk it all. And so what I did for the risk it all feature is you're still risking it all. I initially maybe would have, but I did not want to take that away from this. So you do not have to mark a scar. That's part of the incentive of going this route. But also, instead of using a D12 as your hope die, you're going to now get to use a D20. So you increase your chances of success. And on any success, instead of on a critical success, you clear all hit points and stress, which is a little bit different than the normal risk it all features. So it improves it if you succeed to beyond the avoiding death feature, also improves your chances of doing it, but also doesn't take away the you just die aspect of it. That is still a potential. So I think this works nicely of changing things, but not too drastically, but also definitely impacting the outcome of that roll for the better for the player and or your party to some extent. But still, taking a scar, still having a chance of dying. And that's going to bring us on to the Siphon Life trait. When a creature within close range of you dies, you can spend a hope to make a reaction roll against their difficulty. If you succeed, you can clear stress slots split amongst your allies within far range, your undead companion, and or yourself as you see fit per blow. If you have better verbiage than per blow, let me know. If the adversary was dealt minor damage on their death, you can clear one stress slot. There are other ways that this could have been written. The point, though, here is that it doesn't matter if they clear a stress slot, which obviously here, you wouldn't be able to activate this feature if they cleared the stress slot. But it doesn't matter if they took severe damage, cleared 2 stress slots, now it's considered minor damage, and you only get to clear 1 stress. I think this is clear enough that it's what was dealt to them originally, not the end result after they tried to clear stress slots or anything like that. So the GM can't try to get around this and say, well, they're still going to die, but they used 2 stress slots to clear, or they used 2 armor slots before they died, so you only get to use 1 stress. None of that stuff. So this obviously just scales along with how devastating the blow was that they took that killed them. If the adversary was dealt major damage on their death, you can clear 2 stress slots. If the adversary was dealt severe damage on their death, you can clear 3 stress slots. I think that this verbiage works, makes sense, and mechanically works. If you critically succeed on your reaction roll, you may clear hit points instead of stress slots. This went through very many iterations to get to this point. I always find trying to make the rules a little bit simpler, especially with how this game is built, ends up working the best. So that's where we got to with this Siphon Life feature. I think it's done. Now let's look at the Death Dealer, which is a subclass that you want to play if you just want to deal more necrotic damage. You just want to be more of a threat, yourself more of a magical sorcerer, I would say, type of necromancer. And to start that off, you got this dark magic feature for one of your foundation features. You have the ability to infuse the essence of necromancy into your spells. At the beginning of a session, take a number of d12s equal to your spellcast trait. These are your dark magic dice. You can expend each die to accomplish one of the following. Once again, if you got better verbiage than one of the following, let me know. When you make a spellcast roll, and this works the same when you force a target to take a reaction roll. In this instance, this is going to be basically getting double advantage, and in this instance, it's basically giving double disadvantage. So, for the double advantage, when you make a spellcast roll, you can expend a magic die to roll 2d6, take the higher of those dice, and add it to your spellcast roll. I would just do 1d12, but I don't want you to get the opportunity to add d12, even though the average is, nothing too crazy. I don't want you to have that ability to regularly be getting a +6 or better. So take the higher of the dice on 2d6s. If the dice land on the same number, you may re-roll them if you wish. You will notice this is take a number of d12s. Oh no, this one I didn't change to tokens. I thought of just calling them tokens, but I think it's intuitive enough here. So the other one is when you force a reaction roll. There are some spells within the codex that are going to force that. You can, and I'm sure there's other ways that you might force a reaction roll to be taken. You can just give them, like, once again, double disadvantage, basically the opposite of this. You increase the difficulty of the reaction roll by doing the same thing, taking the higher of the dice and adding that to the difficulty for that reaction roll. Same thing here. If the dice land on the same number, you may re-roll them if you wish. So it's not a critical success, but if you get 2 1s, 2 2s, 2 3s, you can take the increasing risk of trying to roll for a higher number instead of just accepting a 1. The other option here is just to increase the damage with your d12. When you cast a spell that deals magic damage, you may add the dark magic die as a bonus to the spell's damage. If the spell deals damage over time, to multiple targets or the same target multiple times, then roll the dark magic die as if it was a d6 instead of a d12. This works in almost all cases. There is a fringe case with, like the firewall is one that I noticed quickly. It doesn't quite land within any of this. Your DM can very easily determine, is it like the first time that a creature walks into it, it's going to deal an extra d12 damage, or is it every time that a creature walks into it, they're going to take an additional d6? I would probably lean towards just doing the first time a creature walks into it, it's a d12, because I doubt you're going to have like 5 minions walking into this firewall. You just have one of them test it. If they get hurt, you're probably not going to do it again. If they don't get hurt, well, okay, maybe another one goes and tries, or whatever. But you're probably not going to do more than 2, maybe 3 at max times where that firewall is going to be doing damage to anyone outside of a strong creature just going through the wall in order to get to you. You get the idea? Hopefully the GM makes a fair ruling on which route to go in that instance. Otherwise, I think I covered all instances on what kind of choice to make in order to keep this from being kind of overpowered or anything like that, with something where you can target 5 creatures with your arcane barrage, and now you're doing an extra d12 damage to all 5 of them. Like, okay, that's a bit much. That's also going to bring us on to this other feature here, reanimation. You can, I love this. So you can raise the dead for a brief moment, make a spellcast roll, difficulty 13. On a success, the corpse answers up to 3 questions. Doesn't matter if it's success with hope or fear, you can get up to 3 questions from them. The corpse answers truthfully, but it only knows what it knew in life. Just a little GM note here, little tip. Look, especially if this corpse rolls with fear. Remember, witnesses are generally unreliable. So I would say a failure or a success with fear in any way probably makes this corpse unreliable to some extent, potentially at least. One of the questions, maybe they just give a totally wrong recollection of events. Sorry. But, I think that's how you can have a little bit of fun with that fear. With this feature, there's also in the Splendor domain, I think it is, there's a very similar feat of talking to the dead that you could use that same idea for. On a failure, roll a d6. On a 1, the target becomes a rotted zombie. This is way different than the other, the spell. On a 2 to 3, the target becomes a shambling zombie. On a 4 to 5, the target becomes a skeleton warrior. And on a 6, the target turns to ash. So I think this adds a nice, this might be somebody that you need to speak with. If it fails, there's a chance that you've just ended their lives. Instead of going and finding somebody who has like that Splendor domain spell. You take that risk on. So I think that this is fun, or you just get yourself into a little bit of a fight against this zombie because you've essentially given them a little too much necrotic energy, and they've just came not necessarily back to life, but become an undead and angry creature at you. If you abuse this ability, because I don't have any inherent restrictions on how much you could just cast this on some dead body and keep asking them questions and whatnot, I just wanted to give a note here for you, a warning for you, and also advice for a GM kind of here. So if you abuse this ability against the same target multiples of times, the GM may increase the odds that the corpse turns to ash. They may increase the downside of rolling with fear. The corpse may become agitated with you and thus become less responsive. Or they may even increase the threat level of the zombie or skeleton that it turns into as you continuously pump this corpse full of necrotic energies. So you do this twice. Now all of a sudden these zombies are becoming there's other tougher zombies. All of a sudden they're going to be coming up as that. Later levels, all of a sudden, instead of these being tier 1 zombies, well, now they've increased their stats to make them like a tier 2 creature, a tier 3, 4 creature. You get the idea. So a lot of fun ways that the GM can kind of just start to mess with you more and more. So you can't just sit there and spam this on a body, but hey, you could, press your luck and do it a second time if you had one more question you wanted to ask. And, honestly, if they got one more question, I'd just be like, yeah, the corpse is kind of agitated at you. However you want to flavor that exactly, but they answer your question. And then, as you say, that's it. The corpse says, yeah, thank God, because I wasn't about to answer any more questions. Please let me go back to sleep. Something like that. And then, at least, give them another week before you're going to try to wake them up again. That's going to move us on to the specialization feature. Puppet Master. Once per short rest, you speak in tongues at an adversary within close range and make a spellcast roll. On a success, the target must mark a stress and make an attack against another adversary instead of against you or your allies. Yes, this is pretty much lifted from a different ability in the game, as some other things are too. It happens within the game. There's features that are almost identical, worded differently across these domains that really just end in the same thing. On a failure, or once their attack is over, the target is aware of what happened. So there's a couple of differences here between the Grace Domain feature that this copies, but you get the idea. And then Binded Pain. Once per session, when you use your Blood Magic feature, which as a reminder was a feature where you increase the damage essentially at very little cost. I mean, it is at a cost. You increase how deadly a damage was to a creature. So when you deal minor or major magic damage to a creature, you can mark one of your hit points of your own to increase the damage threshold by 1 against that enemy. So once per session, when you use that against a target, you may place a Binded Pain token on that target. The next time that you use your Blood Magic trait on a different target, the target with the Binded Pain token takes damage of the same threshold as target number 2. Now, technically, you could put this on a guy, and then before you get a chance to hit anybody else, the battle ends, and for whatever reason, the guy that you would put this on survives. Maybe it was the big bad, and they get away here. Well, technically, the next time you attack, that big bad would take damage. You could flavor that in ways like just remind your GM that this still happened, and at the beginning of your next session, you just send this, psychic wave of energy across the universe to wherever this guy is, and he immediately just receives a message from you. Maybe the first time that you fight against them, the next time that you meet the big bad, it's at a disadvantage. Okay? I think you always need to be willing, especially with how this game is made, to reflavor things in fun ways. Once again, rule of cool. Another way I really see that you could use this Binded Pain feature would be almost as a curse. So maybe you have a king that you want to bid your duty in some way. You want them to bend their knee to you to do, not literally, but in order to, you want some result from the king. And you know that it's against the nature of the king to do whatever this is that you are asking them to do. So you're going to go through some great extents to essentially bully the king into doing this for you. So what you do one day, you sneak around into the chambers of the king and you put this little curse on them, and there's just this foreboding sense. If it's I would think the GM would ask you to do a spellcast roll against their difficulty or something like that. If it's a full success, there's just this foreboding sense of terror, of concern, whatever that's weighing the king down until the time where you activate this curse within some sort of relatively normal period of time. Maybe over time it would weaken, but narratively you should be collaborating with your GM and you'll come up with any kind of specific details that the GM's concerned about those types of things. But if you were to succeed with fear, maybe the king is aware that somebody put a curse on them. So now the clock is ticking and they're going to seek out some sort of witch doctor or whatever there is available in order to try to lift this curse off of them. Maybe successfully, maybe not successfully. But that's something that they're going to be looking to do within some relative, the GM should give you some sort of idea of time that the clock is ticking, or maybe they don't. Maybe that just starts a tick down. What are they called? A countdown counter or whatever. You fail with hope. Maybe you didn't even sneak into the chamber. You're just talking to the king and you just try to cast this curse on him right in front of his face. You fail with hope. All right. The king knows what happened. The curse does not work. The king resists it, of course. But because of your previous relationship with the king, they don't order your death. Instead, they exile you from this city forever. If you ever show up again, then they, guards are ordered to capture you, and you will ultimately be put to your death or imprisoned, whatever the case in that instance. And of course, if they fail, well, you've got to escape from the kingdom, and you're very clearly not welcome. The king knows what was up. You were trying to put a curse on them. They might not know why, but they know that much. So those are some fun ways that I think that you could flavor this. Oh, by the way, so how do you then use these mechanics essentially against them? So you didn't attack them like you typically would do for blood magic, but you've put this curse on them that operates like this, and then what happens is maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, a few hours later, whatever the case may be exactly, you strike their sun right in front of them, somebody close to them, I would say, and they take that same amount of damage. If you hit the sun for 2 hit points, they take 2 hit points. 1, they take 1, 3, they take 3, and as the GM, you could play that as, 1, it's going to be tough for you to convince the king of this is helping you to a minor extent. It's made things easier. Maybe you have advantage on your next roll in order to convince the king to say yes to whatever your request is. If it's the 2, they're probably going to say yes, whatever, however they want to flavor it. You get the idea, though, is you've hurt someone close to them, and immediately they're just struck with this pain. That impending doom is kind of lifted, but now they're at fear of, they know that you have a hold on them, so now they're fearful of you. You have this hold literally on their well-being. They think, at least. Of course, the curse has now been lifted, technically speaking, but that's how you can use this. Mastery features. Necrotic Wave. Once per long rest, when an ally within far range makes an attack roll, you can immediately make a spellcast roll against the same adversary. On a success, the target is now vulnerable. Your ally gets advantage on their attack roll. If your ally deals damage on this attack roll, it is now dealt twice. So 2 different occasions. If you deal 2 hit points of damage to them, you deal major damage to them, your ally deals 2 major damage to them, you're going to do that, resolve that 2 separate times. So that is essentially it has the same exact result as the level 10 or 9 grace feature where you deal the damage to them again. It's the same thing, just reworded. Don't tell anybody. And then you got darker magic. You can regain, this is obviously just an improved dark magic, an improvement on dark magic. You can regain 1 dark magic die after all long rests and during 1 short rest per session. Also, your dark magic die are now D20s, and in instances where they previously became a D6, they now become a D10. As a reminder, your dark magic was the one where you kind of get double advantages, you get double kind of disadvantage on someone doing a reaction roll, or you deal more damage. So it just makes your stockpile of these more reliable, or it makes these abilities more reliable, makes your stockpile of these dice more plentiful, and it makes the damage scales that up as well as the game had gone along. So there you go. That's the Necromancer subclass feats. Either you're just dealing damage, more so, or maybe you got yourself a little undead companion. Alright guys, thank you very much. If you like this channel, if you like this content, you gotta let YouTube know first if I'm primary. And when you let YouTube know, you're also going to let me know. So like the channel, comment. You know how to let YouTube and myself know that you like this stuff. If you want to improve it, let me know. And of course, subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much. Peace out.